Hey guys, welcome to the workshop. So today's video is going to be all about updating you on the kitchen countertop, so stick around. So what I'm going to do in this video is actually rather quite simple. I'm going to go down through the comments and answer some of the most common questions that have been given. And let me tell you, there's a lot of them that came up very many times. And we're going to cover those as well as me answering those. It's pretty much going to show you what it looks like now, how it's doing now, and what I would have done different. So let's jump right into it. So I will not be mentioning any names, but I am reading right from my phone where all these comments are. Okay, so first question is, did you use anything to protect the underside? No, I did not. And I really wish I did. In fact, there was a comment after that one that answered it in the same way that I was going to answer it in this video. But basically, since making that video, I watched another video of another YouTuber making a countertop. And he said to finish the underside because of moisture, trying to keep moisture from coming up from below, especially at your dishwasher. So I must say, I regret not doing that. It hasn't really been a major issue. In fact, a little bit of movement we've had is actually something my wife doesn't mind. She kind of likes it. So I'm not too bothered by it, but it is noticeable, and it's something different. So all the hand planing I did to keep the top nice and flat was kind of like null and void because it did move. And wood is going to move no matter what you do, but by finishing the underside, and finishing I mean not staining it and going through that because you're not going to see it, is just putting some sort of poly underneath, because that would have just give it some protection, especially where there's a lot of moisture, where the dishwasher is, even around the sink too. I kind of wish I had done that. Here's probably the most common one, and you may have noticed I changed the title of the video a while back, but is, I'm interested in why you call this butcher block when it's not made up of small strips. So yes, this is not butcher block. I mistakenly said that in the video and realized quickly that, oh my goodness, this is not butcher block. This is just a wooden countertop. Butcher block is what I've made some of my cutting boards. They're small pieces, and but unfortunately the video was shot. It was recorded, edited, done, put up on YouTube, and you can't really go and change that. So I maybe said it once or twice, and I figured that whatever, it doesn't matter, but it is not butcher block. So I've had a lot of people ask me of the total cost of this project, and in fact I've just went through my phone and I had two questions on the pricing, and I would love to give you a price on it, but to be honest with you, it just doesn't make any sense to do, because the price I paid for these things back then compared to what you pay for now are just not comparable. Everything has gone up because of the demand is high, the workers are few, and so everything is crazy. Even down to the fact that Lowe's and Home Depot on their Lowe's pricing are totally different from each other now. They used to be neck and neck. Now they are completely different. A lot of wood at Home Depot is cheaper than it is at Lowe's, but then some of the Lowe's stuff is cheaper than Home Depot. You just don't know. So really, to give you a good price is really not really beneficial. Have you ever had any issues over time with the glue joints failing due to the wood expansion and contraction? Absolutely not. In fact, this was a huge question that I got, and there's some other ones about putting dowels or biscuits or even floating tenons. That is, from what I figured out and what I've did, completely unnecessary. A lot of that is just to help you line up the boards when you're going to glue them together, because as far as the joint itself, the glue is stronger than the wood. So if it's going to separate, it's going to separate from the wood fibers, not the glue. So whether you have a dowel or biscuits or something else in there that you want to put in there, like a floating tenon, it's just really not going to do anything except help you line the boards up when you're putting them together. The only places I had an issue with was right in front of the stove, and basically what that was is because there's grains going two different ways, and I knew this was going to happen, and one of my regrets is just not doing this in a different way. But there was a gap that was there when I started, and I figured I'd fill it up with epoxy. I did that. Unfortunately, the expansion and contraction of the wood made it much bigger. So that would have been something I would have done different. Why did you choose to use several coats of polyacrylic as opposed to a couple coats of epoxy resin, like the ones I did to fill the holes? Was it because You did not desire the overall shine or glossy appearance of the epoxy gives. Any major pros or cons to using one or the other? So that's one of these other things. I like polyacrylic. It really works good. It is food safe because it's water based. I have no problems with it. We generally, it's still there. It's still working good. But the epoxy resin up where we put the um, the faucets, that area is great. It's turned out good, and I do wish that I had just done that over the entire countertop, because no matter how shiny it would have been, you could take some steel wool or a Scotch Brite pad and just buff it out so it's not shiny. But it would have completely sealed it up. In fact, if I did that on the bottom side too, this thing would have been so airtight there would have been hardly any moisture that could get into that thing. But I decided not to do that. In retrospect, I would have wished that I did that. It would have cost a lot more because epoxy resin is a lot more expensive. But the problem was I bought the stuff, used it for that, and I have over half of the jug still left. So I probably could have had enough to do it too. The only thing with the polyacrylic that we have noticed is that when you go to clean it, you use your sponge, your soap and water, and you rinse it off. But once it's dried and you go back and touch it, it does seem to be a little tacky. And my wife recently did a little reel on her Instagram that explains on how to clean it. So hoping to come up with a little quick video on that as a quick tip kind of video on how to clean a wooden countertop. Because it's really simple and it works. It's a very proven home remedy to a simple problem that you would have with a wooden countertop. Looks great, good job, good ideas. The only change I might have made would be to miter the planks in the corner and eliminating to fill the cross-grained pieces. Yes, that is something I would have changed too. So instead of doing a long piece on the left side of my stove and then fitting around the stove and then butting it up in the corner, coming over to the sink, fitting it around the sink and going, I really wish I could have just went one long piece, mitered it, and one other long piece and cut a big hole out for the stove and for the sink. It would have just looked much better. We wouldn't have these gaps that got created when the expansion and contracting of the wood has happened, and it would have just relatively looked better. But my only concern would have been I would not have gone the route of using store-bought lumber. I would have gone to my local sawmill, picked out some good wood to use in that nature, and quite frankly, that would have cost more. But in the long run, it probably would have looked better. It probably would have been a little more stable because I wouldn't have bought the store grade, the construction grade pine. But you live and learn. So if I were to do this again, and we understand this isn't going to be here for 30 years, this countertop's going to get beaten up. It's probably going to need to be replaced at some point. So maybe when I replace it, I'll take what I've learned on this one and apply it to the new one. Okay, well, here's my most annoying question, and I get this on a lot of my DIY videos, and it's not really a question. Only DIY if you've got all those tools. I mean, okay, I'm going to be quite honest. If you're watching a video that's a DIY video, and you're watching it because you're going to want to do it yourself, chances are you know that you're going to need tools for this thing. If you're going to build a big countertop, you need to expect that you're going to have some saws. I mean, you can't just buy the board, throw it on there, stain it, and call it a day. So, you might not understand that you are going to need tools, but I'm telling you, if you're going to search for DIY stuff, be prepared to need stuff to make those projects. So the last question I have here is basically, does the countertop warp over time? And yes, it does. It has. I think I've pretty much already covered that in this video. Basically, the reason for that is because of the moisture, and the moisture that is coming from below that I never sealed the wood for. So it's kind of a domino effect. If I'd sealed the wood, it wouldn't have had so much warping. It would have probably looked good. Now, the warping hasn't created any cracks anywhere except for where the wood grains are not in the same orientation. But other than that, around the sink, there's been a little bit of places I might need to recaulk it because there's some gaps that have appeared. But generally, we don't have water spilling into there. There's not really any water residue underneath the sink. So we're capturing all the water from washing dishes and things right there at the sink. And it's actually, as well as right at the dishwasher, which is right next to the sink. That's probably the place where I've noticed it the most, where the board has pulled up and warped up enough to where the metal bracket on the dishwasher is actually kind of turned upward, whereas before it was straight. So it's warped the most there because of the dishwasher, because of the moisture, because I don't have any sort of covering underneath. Yeah, so that's my biggest takeaway from this. So if you're going to do this project, take some of these things that I just mentioned. You know, probably the first thing is when you're doing your finishing, your clear coats, that is, make sure you do it on all the sides, the bottom, the top, everywhere. And then the other thing is, don't piece together pieces. Do big pieces and then cut out where you're doing your sink, your stove, and whatever you want to do. I mean, miter the corner. I actually like the look of them not being mitered, because a miter is very tricky. If you you cut the one, which is fine, but to cut the other one exactly where you need it can be quite tricky. So you're going to need a special saw to cut that kind of cut, and that's going to be quite difficult. And probably the only other thing I would have done is, even as much as I love the polyacrylic uh, finishing coat, it probably would have just been best to do the epoxy resin, because it would have offered not only just a easier cleaning surface, but a thicker surface for some protection. We've had some places where my children have scraped onto it, and unfortunately it put little lines everywhere. And my wife found a recipe to kind of hide it. Not really get rid of it, but to hide it. Of course, I could just re-put another finish on it. But if it was epoxy resin, it might have had a little bit more durability to keep them from doing that. So I would cover the top completely with epoxy resin. You know, you can probably get away underneath of it just covering it with polyacrylic. But if you're going to do epoxy resin, do it on the whole thing. So guys, thank you for watching this video. I hope that it answered a lot of your questions. I know a lot of you have been curious of how it's doing, and I hope that some of the shots that you saw during this video have kind of helped answer that for you. So if you've done this countertop since this video, let me know in the comments below. If you've made that countertop before, let me know and see, you know, if there's anything I still didn't mention that you would have done different or you have done different, let me know in the comments below. But guys, thank you for watching this video. I'll see you next time right here in the workshop. And you're gonna have to have a special saw to cut that. If you don't have a special saw, if you don't have a special saw, if you don't have a special saw to cut that, you're gonna have a lot of problems. So I would definitely just, I lost my train of thought there. So you're gonna need a special, so you're gonna need a special saw to cut that kind of cut, and that's gonna be